made an M off a daily fantasy. His number too high, then I'm probably fading him. He been on the road, he gon' eat up my salary. I hit a buy, he go live before lock. Play back to back, then I probably won't pick on the DFS bachelor, good as it gets. Bit a few liners and hit me a leg. He had a good game, but that might be a trick. Log in the Slack so I know who to pick. Sharing our liners, we all gon' get rich. New to this game, you should come to the pad. You might want some cash and get a good laugh. DFS Sports, we gon' run up a bag. He heard every game and it's making me mad. You buying your lineups, I think you a cheater. DFS bachelor, he the new leader, yeah.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to The Bachelor Pad. I, of course, am the DFS Bachelor, and it's our final look. And as you know, we have doubled our football knowledge this year on the final look, which has been great for everyone. What a great year we're having. So, of course, our boy Donnie Rightside is in with us this morning. Thanks for being here with us. And how you doing this morning?
Yeah, doing good. Looking forward to Week 10 NFL action. A little bit more windier conditions in some outlets. We didn't have that problem last week, and it was a lot of fun watching those scores pile up. But how about this interesting caveat on Sunday? You have 5 1 o'clock games here, Kyle, on the East Coast. 6 of them at 4 o'clock or later. Obviously 7 if you include the night game. But I don't think I've ever remembered, Kyle, where you had more 4 o'clock games than 1 o'clock games. Interesting, and I can't say I hate it.
It's a trip. I was thinking the same thing. Like, God, has this ever happened before? Like, I like to do some of those early only and then afternoon only lineups as well. And I was like, holy shit, there's only 5 games in the morning? Yes. That's crazy. It's pretty cool. I think we can thank COVID for that. I'm assuming that's what's going on. I have no idea, but it's a trip, and it's kind of weird. There's a couple players like Mike Davis, for example's minimum salary, $4,000 in the regular slate, but then you go to the morning only slate and he's $6,700. So it's a little bit different. So we'll go over all of that as we get into it. Of course, thank you all so much. A big cheers. It's a coffee and Bailey's morning for me, man. We're betting on the Masters. We're betting MMA. We've got football. It's a great sports weekend. It's you know, the universe is giving back to us after a shitty year. So there we go. That's pretty nice to have. But thank you all so much for all your support, the kind words, liking the video, sharing it with your friends. That helps more than you guys know. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the team. Hit that subscribe button down below. Hit that bell icon too. I get it a lot. Like, hey, I haven't found your videos in a while. Well, if you hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification every single time we come on and do a show. Donnie and I, we have other guests. Thursday Night Football. We're going to have Kelsey back on next week as well. Everyone loved having Kelsey on as well. So lots and lots of good stuff. Of course, if you want my player pool, projections, lineup optimizer, mass lineup generator, top stacks, articles, etc., you can click that link. Try Draft Dashboard, 30 days for $1. The giveaway that we do, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment in the comment section. That's sponsored by our friends at Tax Relief Advocates, making your tax debt disappear faster than Jason Kokrak's chances at the Masters as a debutante. The only guy I bet on that missed a cut. Son of a bitch, Jason Kokrak. We have a good weekend there. You can give them a call at 1-800-411-9633. And before I forget, our weekly $50 winner, we're going to announce it right now, is Saints Fan Always. So congratulations to you. Hit me up on Twitter, in the comment section. Let me know how to get that to you, and we'll get you sorted out today. So that's all you have to do. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. That easy, $50. Just like that. And don't forget to check out my friends at overlaydfs.com as well. And, of course, if you're looking for winners, I mean, winner after winner after winner, coming off a huge week last week as well. Be sure to head over to rightwager.com. Donnie knows what he's doing. He's been in this industry a long time. So that's why it's such a huge addition here. And then, of course, we're live 4 times a week at Sportsbook Review. The link to that channel is in the video description below. Donnie and I will be live tomorrow or, today, depending on what day you're watching this show, 1 hour before kickoff. Going over all of our bets, predictions, props, answering questions, drinking mimosas, having a good time. So be sure to check us out over there as well. So 11-game slate, and you're right, we got some weather issues. Green Bay, Cleveland, looks like a little bit in Philly and New York, not that bad. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, looks like there's some weather. Of course, Big Ben looks like he will be playing this week. So transitioning right there to quarterbacks, looking over here above 6K. What do you like this week, Donnie?
Yeah, you're talking about those weather conditions here, and I guess the one we can focus in on that we've already seen this past year already. 16-6, we saw the Las Vegas Raiders go in and beat the Cleveland Browns, and it looks like we're going to get a dose of that sort of weather again. So that's going to come up here quite a bit as we go over some wide receivers and certainly quarterbacks. Kyler Murray starting off 8,000 on DK. it almost seems like, Kyle, it doesn't matter how much money you're spending for Kyler Murray, because if you can count on a quarterback rushing between 75 and 100 yards each and every week with a chance to score on the ground, let alone air, 8,000 almost seems cheap. And in one of those games where we see a total, as we like to blend that DFS and gambling involved, a high-scoring game in perfect conditions in a dome out west between Buffalo and Arizona, I can't fault people for reaching up there, Kyle, grabbing that brass ring and saying, you know what is the worst-case scenario you get out of Kyler Murray in this game? 250 in the air, 2 touchdowns, 75 yards on the ground. That's well worth the price here. Aaron Rodgers in one of those games that we're going to look at as well in that Midwest, that Rust Belt. We're taking a look and try to see how we can gauge those windy conditions. Last time we saw the Green Bay Packers in windy conditions, they got beat by a ground game. Now, the problem here is if you say, hey, Aaron Rodgers should be able to light up the Jacksonville defense as long as we don't get 35 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts all game long. But the problem I have, Kyle, is that we talked about all week long during our shows. What are we getting out of Jacksonville here? Laviska Shenault's going to be down. Are we going to hand it off to a running back and say, hey, windy conditions, let's just run the football against the Green Bay Packers? That really could hamper Aaron Rodgers in that game. Russell Wilson playing the Los Angeles Rams. Rams, as we know, have a good defense, good pass rush, but Russell Wilson scores. It doesn't matter how bad. Like, how about that, Kyle, last week against Buffalo? Oh, Russ was bad. Look at his fantasy stats. If that is bad, you would take that each and every week from a quarterback. Josh Allen in that shootout versus Kyler Murray, 7,500, makes sense. But now as you start to slide it down above 6,000, Deshaun Watson is an interesting one. That is going to be heavy windy conditions. But something tells me that he's still going to be able to put a decent day up, because what do you like if it's windy conditions, maybe some rain in the forecast, a quarterback that can scramble and run for possibly 50 to 60 yards. But he's not in any of my plays right now, sitting at 6,900. If we slide it down, Drew Brees by default should have a good day in the dome. You figure on 30 points out of the Saints, probably a dump-off touchdown pass to Alvin Kamara, one to Michael Thomas, and he's off and running. Not a bad price, 6,400. Tom Brady looking for a bounce-back type of day. Ben Roethlisberger, 6,200. Baker Mayfield, even though a bad defense against Houston, I'm laying off that because you could see the reemergence of Chubb coming back in the lineup versus Kareem Hunt. So there are some guys that you would like to pay up for. An interesting one, though, Kyle, that 6,200 coming in at Ben Roethlisberger. If the conditions aren't too windy in that Pittsburgh game, which they're supposed to be under 20 miles an hour, they can do damage against a banged-up defense that everybody scores. You might be able to punch that ticket for 3 touchdown passes out of Big Ben there.
Yeah, Big Ben playing, and we kind of knew he was going to play all week. I mean, you never know with the test, but you always knew. I'm right there with you with Kyler Murray. Look, there is more value this week at running back than there has been any week of the season this week. Kyler Murray, that should be a high-scoring game. I think he's going to be popular, and typically you don't see the highest-priced quarterback very popular in tournaments. But with all the value this week, I love Kyler Murray. He's my fantasy quarterback in my fantasy leagues. He's in my best ball on Draftkings. All of it lines up. Let's go Kyler Murray. And, I mean, he just seems to be getting better and better and more confident when he's running the ball. It should be a lot of fun, that game, and I love Kyler Murray. Aaron Rodgers, you're right. I even saw a report they could have gusts up to 50 miles an hour in both Cleveland and Green Bay. And how is Jacksonville? You mentioned no Laviska Shenault. Green Bay struggles against the run. Green Bay's also going to be without their best cover corner, Jair Alexander. So that's a problem, but I just don't know what a rookie 6th-round pick is going to do in Lambeau with snow flurries and everything else. It's more focused on the ground game. Great matchup, but I'm probably staying away. You're right about Russell Wilson. I mean, put up 29 DraftKings points in the day where you thought he played like crap. You'll take that any week. The Rams are second against opposing quarterbacks, but I do like Russ. Josh Allen, the same thing. You can't go wrong either way. It's going to be a fun matchup between Allen and Kyler Murray. Both running backs have rushing touchdown upside, rushing yards upside. They can throw the ball. Legit 40-point upside from both quarterbacks, so I could go there. Earlier in the week, I loved Deshaun Watson. Now I'm a little concerned. I mean, we saw what happened in that game. Obviously he's head and shoulders better than Derek Carr. But if he's not able to get that ball downfield to Will Fuller, are they really a quick timing type passing game? Not really. Does have some rushing upside, but it's interesting to watch there. I have some interest in Justin Herbert. I know those corners on the outside are pretty good for Miami, but Keenan Allen lines up in the slot quite a bit. Should have a plus matchup there. And they're just going to let this kid throw. He's just chucking the rock. He's at 6,600. Decent weather. Don't have to worry about that. Game where we should see some points. Matchup between 2 rookie quarterbacks. I don't mind Justin Herbert. Then we get to one who is probably going to be pretty popular. He's got the best matchup on paper, Jared Goff. 6,500 on DraftKings, 7,400 on Fanduel. The Seattle Seahawks allow the most fantasy points in the league to opposing quarterbacks. They're without their 2 starting corners this week in Quentin Dunbar and Shaquille Griffin. Not like they've been playing very well anyways. It's crazy. Shaq Griffin's missed like 2 games, and they've had a bye, and he's still giving up, like the 6th most fantasy points, period, by any defensive back in the league. Now, the question is, in a divisional game where there's some pressure to win, can you trust Jared Goff? I'm glad they're at home. I'm always nervous about Goff. It's a boom or bust type deal. He can go out and get you 28 or 30, and he can also go out and get you 12. It's just what Jared Goff does. I agree with Tom. I like Tom Brady quite a bit. I think he bounces back after the week he had last week. Carolina, an effective secondary, absolutely. But they've had another week to get all those weapons used to each other on the outside. Chris Godwin, another week to sort of heal up that finger. Tom Brady should be in a good spot at 6,300. I like him quite a bit as well. And that's it for me over 6K. I'm not doing the Baker Mayfield thing. We just saw it in week 8. He put up like 7 points in that. There's no fucking way that I'm playing Baker Mayfield in those conditions, even though that Houston defense is so bad. So is the Raiders defense. And they were still able to shut him down in the wind and the rain. And you're right, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. It's a running back game in that game. So I'm staying away from that. When we get under 6K, I think there's a few interesting plays here, including one right here near the top of the 5,000s. What do you like this week down here?
Yeah, as always, I like to coin the phrase, sometimes you like a little bit of pain. I got some pain picks at quarterback coming up here in just a few moments, but let's get that higher echelon close to 6,000. Carson Wentz is not a bad play here. The Giants defense hasn't given up a lot of points, but you also saw the comeback with basically nobody in the lineup. Carson Wentz turns in a decent fantasy night last time out against the New York Giants. He'll be able to run for 40, maybe 50 yards if he gets a chance in that game. We've seen it a few times. And also keep in mind, when this team gets on the 1-yard line or really close, Carson Wentz goes in for a quarterback sneak. That is a huge boon to your team because instead of handing off to maybe Miles Sanders coming back, you steal a touchdown that way. But I can almost bank on 2 touchdown passes from Carson Wentz in this game. Alshon Jeffrey coming back, Jalen Reagor healthy, a lot of fortified guys. And once Lane Johnson comes back and possibly Isaac Seumalo at guard, that's now a decent offensive line to give him plenty of time to throw to let those extended plays downfield happen. What do we don't like about Carson Wentz? He's real iffy with the football, fumbling around. When you don't have very many wide receivers and you don't have an offensive line holding up, you'll do that. Now that play action pass, which is so critical in DFS, you can push that football downfield. Now he has some speed and some outlets to get that too. That should be an interesting play. Matthew Stafford completely off my board, not because he had a concussion last week, practiced in full all week. I just don't like his setup going in without Kenny Golladay against that Washington Redskins defense, which is decent. Joe Burrow is an interesting one, and it's almost the feel, so, well, wait a second, why would you go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense? They're now getting healthy. It's almost by default, Kyle, because I know you talk a lot about Joe Burrow in the fourth quarter. When you're spending $5,700 for a quarterback and he might be down 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and still playing hard, that could boost you up from 15 points to 25 points in fantasy very quickly. So he's an interesting one. Do I recommend a play on Joe Burrow? As if you can say, hey, I really think this is going to work out. Not necessarily, because I still go back to that game where they went on the road, Kyle, against the Baltimore Ravens. Didn't look all that well, scored only 3 points. But that's really the only downfall in Joe Burrow's starts this year. Interesting one here. Drew Lock going out to play the Las Vegas Raiders in a dome. You saw last week in a dome. They were porous, Kyle, for the full 3 quarters. But as we like to say, it's a 4-quarter game. And if you think the Raiders are going to win this game, Drew Lock goes, pretty much nuts in the fourth quarter as they score 3 times. He has all his weapons back. Noah Fant's going to play in this game. Got some good practices this week. So you have the tight end. Tim Patrick will play at wide receiver as well, alongside Jerry Jeudy, who was banged up with that shoulder injury. And the defense stinks for the Raiders. Drew Lock has a live arm. He has a chance to hit some deep shots in that game. So not a bad look at 5,500. And you're probably going to get the slot. Well, wait a second. Why would we spend 5,500 on Drew Lock when we can get Derek Carr going up against Denver? Keep in mind, last week when me and Kyle broke down that game and took a look at it, we knew Julio Jones would have a big day. Not because it was the Denver defense, because the Denver defense would be down 2 legitimate cornerbacks in the NFL. Both of those guys, Bryce Callahan and also A.J. Bouye, will play this week. So I agree with Drew Lock being 5,500 on the board and Derek Carr being 5,400. I think Lock overall is the better play in that game, and certainly that's going to show up. Now, here's the pain plays that we like here, Kyle, and you're going to like this one, being a San Francisco 49er fan.
Oh, boy.
Nick Mullins. Now, usually you watch the game last week against New Orleans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's a really good defense for New Orleans. I'm not saying that in any disrespect, but coming into this week for Nick Mullins, did you see a couple weeks ago when Kyle Shanahan was late in the football game, getting blown out versus Green Bay, pushed across 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and that's what you're looking at here. So I would say right now, calling my shot with Nick Mullins 5,300, Kyle, he will throw for over 300 yards versus that New Orleans defense in the Dome. Keep that one down. Yeah, Tom Brady couldn't do a damn thing against that team. Here I am calling Nick Mullins go over 300 yards. But also, slide this one down a little bit lower. And if you're looking for a deep shot, you want to pay up for running back, quarterback, tight end, whatever it may be. Alex Smith is going to get a start in a Dome versus Detroit, and you're only going to pay $5,200. If you look last week, he wasn't a comeback role, threw for 300 yards, a touchdown, and a couple interceptions. I get that. But I actually think they have a legitimate chance to win this game and probably end up somewhere in the mid-20s. If I'm paying $5,200 and I can get 2 touchdown passes possible out of my quarterback, maybe more versus a horrendous Detroit defense, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that $5,300. But if you want pain, you want Nick Mullins here.
Oh, man, that does feel like pain. I hope you're right. I'm going to be watching that closely. Oh, God, I'm so nervous about that game. This season's basically a wash for the Niners. There's too many damn injuries, you know. Right at the top, I love Carson Wentz tomorrow. And I know there's a little bit of a weather issue there, but you look at that game just a few weeks back, he put up 32 against the Giants. And with all the weapons back, you know, now you've got Goddard another week to get healthy and all the receivers back. I like Carson Wentz quite a bit. Miles Sanders, now you can work that short passing game. It was the first time when you look at the Eagles injury report, you're like, wait, just a couple of guys? It's been over a page long all year long. I like Carson Wentz quite a bit. I will say the Giants are 10th against opposing quarterbacks, but I love this matchup. And I'm going to have a ton of Carson Wentz tomorrow. I completely agree with you with Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford. I'm just not playing Stafford anymore. They frustrate the shit out of me in the red zone. That team, the way they call plays, I cannot fucking stand watching Detroit play. They just piss me off. No Matthew Stafford. Joe Burrow, just based on volume. No quarterback throws more passes, has the ball in their hands more, and that's crazy to say than Joe Burrow. Like, he's going to run with it. He's going to throw it. The whole offense is Joe Burrow. So even though it's a tough defense, I do agree with Burrow. One guy, you know, that I like, and look, the Chargers secondary has not been what we thought. They're allowing the 3rd most fantasy points in the league to opposing tight ends. We saw the upside and we saw the flashes last week. I kind of like Tua at 5,600. He's only 6'8" on Fanduel as well. I think that game last week gave him a lot of confidence in another game where we should see some points. I like Tua quite a bit, and Drew Lock. I have Drew Lock in my cheat sheet this week. That Raiders secondary allows the 5th most fantasy points. I do agree that there's a chance they could start out really slow and be behind again, and then they're just going to have to throw the ball, and Drew Lock showed he could do it against a bad Atlanta defense. He's not facing a much better defense this week, so I do like Drew Lock. And then one other guy that I have marked down here all the way at the bottom is Daniel Jones. Look, we just saw it 2 weeks ago. He put up a 23 against the Eagles. In his last game against them last year, he put up a 20. It's 5,200. Eagles are 13th against opposing quarterbacks. They do have a good pass rush. But what happens when Daniel Jones gets pass rush? He has a chance to escape the pocket, make some things happen with his legs. I actually do think if you're looking for a tournament boom or bust, there's Daniel Jones. And if you want the pain, it's Alex Smith. But keep in mind, it could also be pain when his leg flies off and, you know, we have like someone dying on the field, last Boy Scout situation there. I don't know, Alex Smith, it just scares the crap out of me every time he plays. But you're absolutely right. That defense is god-awful in Detroit, and threw for 300 yards. It was shocking. I could not believe my eyes when I saw that stat line last week for Alex Smith. So there is some upside there. There's just value across the board this week. I think you can really create the lineup that you like this week. Lots of options there at quarterback. When we slide over to running back, a position we talked about, lots of value this week. Got some weather games this week. Not the super expensive guys, you know, with McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook, etc. What are you looking at here running back above 6K?
Yeah, above 6K, I'm not interested all that much in a lot of options above 6K, and they're usually the bell cow type guys. I think you are going to get some values. You said to start off, there are a lot of players that are going to get a lot of quality snaps this weekend, range between that 4,500 and 5,500. But if we talk at the top of the end of the spectrum, Alvin Kamara obviously comes up. 8,200 is very expensive. Now, the one way you can really get after San Francisco is typically through the air. A lot more guys banged up in that secondary. You have a lot of mouths to feed on New Orleans now. So when you take a look at Alvin Kamara. Why did we love him, Kyle, over the past couple weeks? Well, when you're down 3 wide receivers, Alvin Kamara turns into a wide receiver and gets a ton of target share. Now you have Michael Thomas on the outside. We know that he loves to get the football, getting healthy as it goes, so maybe that's 10 targets his way. Emmanuel Sanders on the opposite side playing that little revenge type situation. Yeah. He's going to want to eat against San Francisco. And also, if you're taking a look from a a New Orleans perspective in this game with Alvin Kamara, you've used him a lot. You're still going to give him 10 to 15 touches, but do you need to give him the 25 touches to tell me that I need the 8,200 to spend against an average defense against the run? I'm not into Alvin Kamara. He'll be picked and he'll probably score some points, but at 8,200, I'm not interested because he's a full 1,000, 1,100 higher than anybody else on the DraftKings board. Aaron Jones, I think, is going to have a fantastic day against Jacksonville. I don't think Jacksonville's all that cracked up, on defense to come in here in a cold environment and say, hey, let's really get after the Green Bay Packers. Their season's just about done. Packers are fighting for much bigger things. But here's the problem I have. Boy, wouldn't you have liked it even more, Kyle, if this game was maybe a month ago, 60 degrees, light windy conditions, the safeties have to drop back. Now the safeties and the linebackers can play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. Might factor on holding him down a little bit, but I still think he has a big day at 7,100. Here's a guy I'd be willing to pay up for. James Conner going up against that Cincinnati defense. Already a terrible defense, down a couple guys in the secondary. This is one of those games where if you look at Pittsburgh, they had the COVID issues early in the week. Just about everybody is healthy for this team from an offensive line perspective, wide receiver perspective. They're all practiced, all got in full games. So you might be able to get off some of those play action passes. And keep in mind last week, Mike Tomlin said no issues with Ben Roethlisberger's knee. We're not even worrying about that. But that just sounds to me like not much behind James Conner. Feels like he's going to get 20 carries plus in this game because if you think the Steelers are going to win, he's going to grind it on the fourth quarter. I like paying up for him at 6,900. If we take a look at Josh Jacobs going against a good defense in Denver, I'm kind of out on that. Lost last week. Booker had some good fair share in that game and looked like he was going to be a decent option. Maybe a little bit off of that Josh Jacobs. 6,400 for Miles Sanders. It's one of those where he says he's healthy. He's probably healthy. He can rip off a 70-yard run, but just getting back into play. We saw earlier this season Doug Peterson coming out saying, hey, Miles Sanders has a conditioning issue, which made me scratch my head. Normally, you would pay $6,400 for Miles Sanders going against the Giants, but this one, I just like to lay off and let it see it before I can believe it. And also 6,800 and 6,700. I don't agree with this. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt side by side. Either one of these guys can steal those carries. I don't want to flip the coin and say, boy, I was the odd man out on 6,800 when I could have taken Kareem Hunt at 6,700 or vice versa. Not big on that. And Boston Scott at 6,000 is ridiculous to pay against the New York Giants. I'm completely out on that with Miles Sanders coming back.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm like, that's just a typo. Like, what the hell happened? Fanduel's usually the ones that do that. Like, sometimes you'll just see this random fourth stringer at 7,900, and you're like, what the hell? Dang. And you'll still see people play him.
What do they know?
It's crazy. And there's just not a lot of great spots for me up top. I love Aaron Jones. A full extra 4 days or so to get healthier after coming back last Thursday against the 49ers. 15 touches, 5 targets. That was more involved than I expected him to be in that game. Jacksonville struggles against the run, a game that should be on the ground in the weather conditions. Aaron Jones, he's going to be very popular. I have him as the highest projected owned running back this week at 32%. Maybe Mike Davis down at 4,000 will probably give him a run for his money as well. We'll get to that. But Aaron Jones, in terms of running backs at the top, should be the highest owned, has big-time upside. I love the matchup. So you're right. In tournaments, what's a nice pivot? James Conner. Why is James Conner a good pivot? He burned everyone last week. Had an absolutely terrible game against the Cowboys. Only had 9 carries, couple of targets, put up 4 points. Everyone was playing him. Now you come in against the Bengals team. Everyone's down a little bit on Conner. Had a bad week, burned him. So now his ownership is going to be much lower. It's going to be considerably a third that of Aaron Jones. Bengals 24th against running backs. If you're looking for a tournament pivot, I do think you could do a whole lot worse than James Conner. I like them both. One other guy I like above 6K, you're absolutely right about Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Now it's just too hard. How much is Nick Chubb going to play coming back from that injury? How much is that going to hurt Kareem Hunt? It's a great matchup. And if you're going to play, if you want to play them, then you're making multiple lineups and you're playing them both and trying to catch that lightning in a bottle. Houston does allow the second most fantasy points in the league, or third most fantasy points in the league, rather, to opposing running backs. Dreadful run defense, but which one of those running backs is going to get you there? So I would just have exposure to both if you're going to go there. But one guy I do like, we talked about that Jacksonville-Green Bay game. Now, it's a little unfortunate. You bring up a great point. I would prefer that the safeties have to be back, especially with Jair Alexander out and sort of having to help on the outside. If they can bring them closer to the line and help that anemic run defense. Green Bay allows the second most fantasy points to running backs. I do like James Robinson, 47 carries over the last 2 weeks. There is some upside there. I'm going to have some exposure to James Robinson. I think he's fairly priced. But again, if Green Bay is able to focus on stopping that run, will they be able to do it? I have seen no evidence that they can. I think they're a soft team up front. So James Robinson I'll have some exposure to. And don't be surprised when he's involved in the passing game as well. If it's as windy as they say, maybe it's a little tougher for Jake Luton there to get the ball to DJ Chark, etc. We mentioned no Laviska Shenault in this game. So some short dump offs to James Robinson as well make a whole lot of sense. Miles Sanders I have some exposure to. I just like the big play upside. We sort of saw that when he came back against Pittsburgh. And we're like, oh, God, there's no way he's going to be able to do anything. Next thing you know, 70-yard touchdown, and he broke the slate, and, I was pissed. Everyone was pissed. So there is some upside there. Again, it's a tournament. It's a risky tournament play because you just don't know how healthy he actually is. He appears to be. So at 6,400, I could take a chance there. And that's it for me over 6K. Like, Chris Carson banged up. Chase Edmonds, we don't know if Kenyon Drake's going to play. He's a true game time decision, so that changes everything there for Chase Edmonds. So that's really it for me. The ones I'm really focusing on, Jones, Connor, and James Robinson are the ones I'm really focusing on over 6K. Now, usually a very narrow group of players under 6K at running back, but this week we've got some nice value, especially in those 4,000 range, in the 4,000s to 5,000 range. What do you like this week down here for some value at running back?
Yeah, two guys at 5,600 I think make decent plays. Gibson for the Redskins, because I do think, again, they have a chance to pull off the victory against Detroit. And Detroit hasn't shown much on defense, either the way of defending the pass or not. And you also take a look at a quarterback like Alex Smith, that in the passing game, he likes to target some running backs, which we're going to get to another running back on the Redskins in just a little bit. So I think Gibson's a decent play to at least score a touchdown. Jerick McKinnon, you saw already Kyle Shanahan say, look, he's going to get a heavy workload. Anytime I hear that below 6,000, that almost is like a sign-me-up point. You say, well, wait a second. If they expect to get blown out, what's his carries going to be in the third and fourth quarter? But he still will be active in the pass game. Got a couple targets last week, scored a touchdown on the ground. That's the one guy that I look for. If you have a pass interference, if you get it down low, he's going to get that goal line carry. But also, again, when you're below 6,000, you're looking for your fair share of carries and touches. I would not be surprised here, Kyle, if it's 15 to 20 touches for Jerick McKinnon. That'll pay for itself at 5,600 specifically at the end of the game. And again, I can't get enough of this, of Kyle Shanahan saying, look, I'm the offensive guy on this team. The stats are on me. So if I have 10 points, or I'd rather have it 17 points and 24 points, most quarterbacks, most teams would just throw in the towel and say, really don't care what the score ends up. Let's not get hurt. Kyle Shanahan, not that way. In the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to go, they'll be running an offense, and that could be a boon to get you those extra 5 to 6 points in the fourth quarter. As we slide it down, Giovanni Bernard going up against Pittsburgh. Anytime you hear that, no Joe Mixon, it is an elite defense, yes, but you're talking about a guy at $5,400 here on DraftKings that's going to be the center of the attention from getting the dump down passes on a really good pass rush, or even running the football as is. You can't go wrong at 5,400 from a guy that you project to be in there, 65 to 70% of the offensive snaps overall as a running back. That's fantastic stuff. Ronald Jones the second, 5,300, going up against a Carolina defense that you can run on. Now, here's the thing I like, because if you watch the past couple weeks, I'm staying so far away from Ronald Jones, they're not even including him here. I think this is one of those games, Kyle, where you're really going to say, what did we do well at the beginning of the year? Why was our offense cruising? And now all of a sudden we're trying to throw it all the way down the field, not rushing anymore. Center your offense back to the running game and work off a play action pass that can help Tom Brady, that can help the wide receivers score, and more importantly, obviously Ronald Jones II. I think he's in line for 15 carries this week, which should give him in that 75 to 80-yard range and the possibility of a touchdown. Now, when you look at Leonard Fournette, who's priced a little bit higher at 5,500, I like Fournette in one of those games that's more targeted to be a shootout where maybe they wouldn't be the favorite, because we do see third downs. He's going to be the third down back catching the ball out of the backfield. I think Ronald Jones can play that pretty good lead dog position. And now as we get down to some pain, you're looking at a game with windy conditions that Kyle and I already talked about, and that's going to be versus the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. David Johnson not going to play in this game, so who do we line up? Another Johnson, Duke Johnson in the backfield. We've seen him score on goal line carries. We've seen him get dump-offs in the red zone. If you're having windy conditions and a pass rush coming down to you, who is your best friend? Tight end and the back out of the backfield. backfield. Duke Johnson should get his fair share of run in this game. But also, I talked about another Redskins running back. Forget about Gibson, who I do think is going to play that lead dog. How about J.D. McKissick last week? Coming back in that, dink and dunk role that we always laugh at Alex Smith. Who's the beneficiary of that? The running back out of the backfield. J.D. McKissick, I believe, 8 or 9 catches last week. I think he's a valuable opportunity going against Detroit with a quarterback that doesn't like to target the deep guy. He loves to target the intermediate routes and also guys out of the backfield. So paying what? $4,900 for him. Now, a solid running back I think you're going to get in the $4,500 range is going up against my Philadelphia Eagles. That's Wayne Gallman, showing the propensity to score touchdowns, getting carries on the goal line. When you take a look at Devontae Freeman, who's not going to play once again this week, headed to IR and possibly missing a couple more weeks, he's not a bad option. He's a true running back on that team. If they hand it off and use that read option, I can look at him getting between 10 to 15 carries and the chance of scoring a touchdown at around $4,500. Sign me up for that, Kyle.
Yeah, I love Wayne Gallman. 3 straight double-digit fantasy outputs. It's sort of shocking. It's weird to look at, but you're right. They just don't have any running backs there. I love Antonio Gibson and Jerick McKissick. The Lions allow the most fantasy points in the league to opposing running backs. Gibson's been battling that shoulder thing all week. He's now off the injury report. He's ready to go. Running backs typically get these shoulder injuries because they're getting constantly smacked in the shoulder 30 times a game. McKissick, I love at 4,900. Alex Smith, listen, I've watched Alex Smith for years, and that's where he's going to go with the football. You saw 14 targets for Jerick McKissick last week. Absolutely insane against a bad Detroit defense. I like both Washington running backs. You make a great point about Jerick McKinnon. I will say, the Saints third against opposing running backs this year, but again, should be involved in the passing game, so I could go there. Giovanni Bernard, obviously in play anytime Joe Mixon's not going to play. Back-to-back 20-point outings. He's going to get, 13 to 16 carries. He's going to be targeted in the passing game, especially with that pass rush for Pittsburgh going after that bad Cincinnati offensive line. Joe Burrow likes to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Where's the quickest way to get rid of the ball most times? Right there to your running back out of the backfield, so I do like Giovanni Bernard quite a bit. Duke Johnson, ton of exposure to him this week. Little revenge game, sort of revenge game. They should feel flattered. They got, a second-round pick for him in that Bill O'Brien, super GM mode, trading second-round picks for scat backs out of the backfield. Can you imagine someone trading a second-round pick for David Meggett back in the day? Of course not. Get the hell out of here with that. Absolutely insane. Another guy at 5K who's going to come up off of the practice squad again, and another little revenge narrative is Kalen Ballage. 18 touches last week. Justin Jackson been ruled out for this game. He sort of burned us all last week with that warm-up knee injury. It's just absolute bullshit. I can't stand when that happens. But Kalen Ballage came in and played really well. They still have the rookie Joshua Kelly, but it looks like Ballage is going to sort of be the passing down back as well. Played 62% of the offensive snaps against a Miami team that's 20th against opposing running backs. I could get involved with that. Wayne Gallman, you mentioned, and then all the way down here at 4,000 on the main slate, obviously with no Christian McCaffrey. You got to look at Mike Davis. He's going to get his full complement of work. His last game against Tampa Bay put up a 16. Listen, Tampa Bay is good against the run, but Mike Davis is also going to be involved in the passing game. Even last week, with Christian McCaffrey having the game that he did and taking all those snaps, Mike Davis was still targeted 6 times in the passing game. So he's going to get a full workload at 4,000. Now, look, I've got him projected at 43% ownership right now, and it could be even higher in the main slate. It's basically a free square. Everyone's going to play him. So I do agree, if you're looking to pivot off of the chalk there and hope for a bad game, guys like Gallman and McKissick are going to be really, really interesting in that range, just a few hundred more. But Mike Davis, I would be remiss if I didn't mention him as well. That's it for me at running back. Lots of value this week at running back. It's sort of refreshing to see that. Now we get to the nuts and the bolts, right? The wide receiver position, the wide receiver cornerback matchups. Let's get to it. What do you like here if paying up at wide? We talked about all the value at running back. There is some value at quarterback. What are we looking at up here above 6K at wide receiver?
Yeah, it's a shame you're going to get some impacted conditions here because Devontae Adams, the way he's rolling right now with Aaron Rodgers, and if they're going up against a team that you figure could answer the bell back, that's another big day at Devontae Adams. It's just a matter of how much do you need him and how long is he going to be effective in that game, because if you're up 2 touchdowns late in the fourth quarter, we're not passing for Green Bay. But then again, you can look and say, hey, last time they played the 49ers and blew the doors off them, he still had a monster game. And sometimes, Kyle, all you need is the first 2 quarters to get after it. But paying up $9,000 on DraftKings, $1,300 more dollars than the next wide receiver. What do we need, Kyle? 12 for 175 and 2 scores, which he can do. Yeah. But I'm just looking at this type of environment. I don't know if that's exactly what Green Bay wants to do there. DeAndre Hopkins going up against Buffalo. Looks like no matter what, he's going to get force-fed the football. Tre'Davious White's starting to play a little bit better football, getting healthier here. Maybe that's a little rivalry in that game. So I don't know if I want to pay up 7,700. But then again, 55, 56 points in that game. If you could say DeAndre Hopkins is going to get 6 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown, I mean, hey, it is what it is, and maybe that's his floor, and that's a decent price. But 7,700, I think there's some other options to look at. DK Metcalf at 7,600, the upper echelon guys going against Los Angeles Rams. You already saw Jalen Ramsey say he's not going to shadow DK, but that's still a pretty good defense here. But if you're just rolling with, hey, let Russ cook, and it really doesn't matter who they play on defense, strike them up for high 20s, low 30 points, you're looking for a pretty good share out of DK Metcalf, but also always comes into he's got a really good wide receiver on the opposite side that's going to be expensive as well. It's one of those where, darn it, I hope I didn't pick the wrong wide receiver this week, or maybe Jalen Ramsey is going to shadow over DK Metcalf more than not. Stephon Diggs going up against Arizona. Look for a couple deep shots to him. Paying $7,500 here on DraftKings. I don't think that's really out of whack. I think that's right in line with his value, and I do think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. So if we're taking a look at a wide receiver that only needs 2 to 3 catches here to have a big impact on a game, Stephon Diggs should be able to get after it. Michael Thomas going up against San Francisco. Just one of those things we talked about, Kyle, with Alvin Kamara. As we take a look at the overall landscape, there's a lot of mouths to feed on New Orleans. Yes, one guy can go off, maybe 2 guys, but there's about 4 to 5 guys that need the football. Are we paying up for Michael Thomas? I think he gets in the end zone here because big-time player. Eventually, he's going to get his targets. Look, I need my touchdowns now. I think he comes up big in this game. Keenan Allen going in, one of the better wide receivers. If you take a look at Pro Football Focus, Kyle, top 5 wide receiver in the NFL with a rookie quarterback that's averaging over 300 yards a game. It's interesting because you take a look at the Dolphins' defense and you say, hey, that's, look at their overall numbers. You can get in the shootouts. They do have 2 legitimate cornerbacks over on that side. So a slight downgrade for Keenan Allen, even though young Justin Herbert does like to look for him here. Cooper Kupp banged up coming into this week, but I got to say, all 3 starting wide receivers for the Rams should be in play. A banged up and horrendous secondary for Seattle. They have no choice but a couple of those guys to go off in this football game. Are you paying up for Cooper Kupp? You're going to look for some value that I have on the outsides. And when we take a look a little bit down under these 6,000s. Terry McLaurin's always a solid option. You know he's going to get his fair share. 7-8 targets a game, chance for hitting a deep shot, and all-around really good wide receiver going up against a porous Detroit secondary. And what do we like the best about it? They're playing in a dome, so you're going to get good weather conditions, no rainy conditions to worry about. Will Fuller down on this week again, just due to the fact that his strength is his speed. 30 to 40 mile an hour winds, trying to hit deep shots, not always the best look in this. Fulgham, I think, is a little bit overpriced for the Eagles at 6,400, with, again, a lot more people coming back on the offense. Tyler Boyd, he's always going to be real high on my radar. Somebody's got to catch the ball this weekend in a losing scenario in the second half, which we think Cincinnati probably will be down. He's not a bad option at $6,400. The guy I actually like the most, if this makes sense, over 6,000, sitting at 6,300, a bargain. Mike Evans wasn't targeted last week. You saw Bruce Arians not happy about it. You know Tom Brady's going into the locker room this week. Hey, Mike, my bad. Like, you are the man on this team at wide receiver. I got to start feeding you the football. Look for play action and red zone shots to Mike Evans. Don't be surprised. 2 touchdowns, Kyle, out of Mike Evans this week.
I like that call.
Yes.
Yeah, I like Mike Evans, and he's had good history against Carolina. There are good plays, and you're right about Devontae Adams. I mean, it's a smash spot for him. Sidney Jones is going to be covering him on the outside, but in those weather conditions, and will Jacksonville fight back enough to make this where they have to try to push to get him the ball? I don't know. I will say this. In windy conditions, Devontae Adams catches a lot of short crossing routes, a ton of them. And we sort of saw that a couple weeks ago in that Minnesota game. He still put up a 30 in that game with bad weather, and they got beat, and he's still targeted 12 times. So I will have exposure. I do think he's a good play. But you're right, you need him to not be night and day the best play when he's that much more expensive than everyone else. Hopkins and White, they faced off a few times in their career. Sometimes it's gone White's way, other times it's gone Hopkins' way. It's real 50-50. I just think there's better options underneath. I have a little bit of light exposure. Like if I'm maxing out the quarter, playing 100 lineups in like a quarter tournament, I'll of course have him in about, 5 or 10% of my lineups. But I'm not forcing him in everything. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. The Rams are number 1 in the league against opposing wide receivers. You mentioned Jalen Ramsey's not going to shadow. They've been doing something really interesting with Jalen Ramsey if you watch the Rams games. He's not always on the outside. They like putting him in the slot and sort of taking that away from teams. That'll be interesting to watch, but he's always got that big play upside, so I've got some exposure there. Stephon Diggs, he's going to see that Patrick Peterson shadow coverage. I like both Stephon Diggs, and we'll get to some lower price guys too. John Brown on the outside, Drake Kirkpatrick banged up. If Peterson follows Diggs, he's still giving up about a third of a fantasy point per route ran against. I do still like Stephon Diggs. 12 targets last week. He's been targeted 32 times over the last 3 weeks. A game with a ton of points and a high total. I like Stephon Diggs quite a bit. Michael Thomas, you're right. Last year in that shootout against the 49ers, he put up a 33. I think now with his second game back, getting more and more healthy against a team they want to beat. I know the Saints are mad about what the 49ers did to him last year in New Orleans. I think Michael Thomas has sort of that first big for those fantasy owners who are pissed at Michael. A lot of people drafted Michael Thomas in the first round. You drafted him before running backs. Now you're looking at him like, shit, I've gotten, 2 games out of him. He's gotten me like 15 fantasy points all year long. I think he has a big game. I like his price at 7,400, and I do think he scores a touchdown. Keenan Allen, I love Keenan Allen. Just a target monster. He's going to spend a bunch of time in the slot, and when you go in the slot, you sort of avoid that Byron Jones, Xavier Howard type coverage. Xavier Howard and Byron Jones stay on the perimeter 91 and 94% of their defensive snaps. Nick Needham is going to be that slot corner where Keenan Allen lines up 47% of the time. I like Keenan Allen quite a bit at 7,100. I think he's a great option. You're right about the Rams wide receivers. All 3 of them pay up for. Without their 2 starters in this week, they're going to be facing guys like DJ Reed, Amadi, Trey Flowers. I mean, this is a who's who of bad defensive backs. So if Jared Goff can get his shit together, look at the last game that the Rams played. Cooper Kupp had 21 targets in that game. That's absolutely insane. You just don't see that very often. I love Cooper Kupp, love Robert Woods. And, of course, there's another guy down here for some value when we look at our pain picks, as we like to say. I love that addition to the show. Robert Woods, the same thing. We just mentioned it. Terry McLaurin, absolutely. Even though Alex Smith is not a vertical thrower, and you sort of saw the big play that he had last week. It was one of those fluky plays where he catches a crossing route, gets hit by 2 guys, somehow doesn't go down, and then scampers the rest of the way. But he can do that. If he's got a little bit of space on a short route, Terry McLaurin can absolutely fly. He's going to be the most targeted Washington wide receiver. I think he and J.D. McKissick are probably in that 8 to 10 target range for both of them. So, of course, you can go Terry McLaurin. Loved Will Fuller at the beginning of the week. It's just hard to trust that now. He's not one of these, hey, let's just get him the ball in space and let him work. He's one of those vertical threats with the weather situation in Lambeau Field. Makes it a whole lot more difficult to trust him. Tyler Boyd, I'm glad you brought him up. Pittsburgh, this is actually surprising. Pittsburgh has allowed the 8th most fantasy points in the league to opposing wide receivers. You just simply wouldn't think that when you think of that defense and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Joe Hayden. The problem is they're really weak on the other side. Steven Nelson has not played well in the slot. Mike Hilton is one of the worst cover corners in the slot in the league. He's targeted on 23% of the defensive routes, the most on the team. He gives up over a half a point on routes that he's targeted. He gives up 0.43 fantasy points per just route ran against. Then you look at Tyler Boyd, who's going to line up in the slot on 85% of his offensive snaps. Tyler Boyd should be in line for a big day. I like Tyler Boyd quite a bit. Mike Evans, you're right. Aside from that short touchdown that he got last week or the week before, did he get in the end zone? Or no, they didn't even get it. No, yeah, they didn't get in the end zone. 6 targets, 10. Just an abysmal game. But you got to figure this week they try to get him the football a little bit more. 26, 21, and 10 in his last 3 against Carolina. So I don't hate that Mike Evans call. I think Tom Brady knows he needs to get him involved. And one other guy I'll talk, or a couple other guys, I suppose. I don't mind Robbie Anderson going the other way against Tampa Bay. I know Tampa Bay's got a good secondary, put up a 22 in his last game out against the Bucks. Has no single-digit fantasy point totals throughout the entire year in a game where we expect Tampa Bay to bounce back and score. Carolina's going to have to throw the football. I think Robbie Anderson is their big play guy. I don't mind him at 6,100 as well. A little bit of Juju in the slot as well. I do like that matchup. Cincinnati secondary a little bit banged up this week. Juju's going to see Mackenzie Alexander in the slot. They're going to have to start some Tony Brown Jr. out there. Good Lord. So Juju, Claypool, Johnson, all those guys are in play for me as well. Under 6K after all that rambling I just did up there. What do you like under 6K? And again, more value at wide receiver again this week.
Yeah, I like a lot of these plays below 6,000 this week. And if you take a look, at the top end of the spectrum, with Jarvis Landry, normally I would really be interested in this because you have two guys coming back on the ground game. He's the beneficiary of the middle routes that you're going to run the intermediate routes all play action. Windy conditions, sort of laying away because it's what's the pace of the game are we looking at here? Like, you can't be taking DFS guys if the game ends up 13-10. It's really not going to work overall. And there's a capability of that happening again. I'm just out on just about every skill guy outside of maybe Deshaun Watson because he can run and do some damage with his feet. The one that I can't, Antonio Brown sitting here at 5,800 when already you saw that they want to recenter and try to get back to the ground game for Tampa Bay. And even say Bruce Arians, they gave him way too many snaps. We look for him to have about 15 to maybe 20 snaps in the game. Anytime I hear that, I'm really not interested in paying up for the guys if it doesn't look like they're extremely ready to target this guy. And we take a look at Godwin on one side, Mike Evans on the other, and you're trying to run the football, I'm not going to be paying $5,800 for Antonio Brown this week. Chase Claypool going up against Cincinnati. Windier conditions, 15, 16, 17 miles an hour. So not too bad over in Pittsburgh. If you think you have one of those Claypool games where that secondary is really beat up for Cincinnati, so the rocket screens for Chase Claypool have been fantastic this season. Maybe you see a couple of those heading into this Sunday, and you say, hey, if they're inside the 10-yard line, instead of passing the football, you throw those rockets that he did against the Philadelphia Eagles. So maybe a decent shot at 5,800. Brandon Ayuk, just by default, where if you think that it's going to be a blowout type game with the New Orleans Saints in that environment, you figure he's going to get that target share in the fourth quarter with the chance to score. If we slide it down, Jerry Jeudy was fantastic, and Drew Lock really likes to look forward to him. But I think there's another guy that I'm going to pay down for. The 5,600 for Jeudy isn't a bad option going up against Oakland, but I got one other guy on that team that we're going to take a look at in just a few moments here with the Denver Broncos. Brandon Cooks, again, sitting in that. Usually I would like Brandon Cooks. Seems like he has a nice little rapport now going with Deshaun Watson. In the windy conditions, I'm completely out on that situation. So getting down into some of the lower 5,000 end, 5,300, John Brown for the Buffalo Bills going home. I don't want to say it's a revenge spot situation, but if you have a total that you think is going to explode in that game, he only needs 2 to 3 catches to get behind that secondary and have a big day. So there's a chance on that high ceiling for John Brown at 5,300. The other guy I was talking about on the Denver Broncos, Tim Patrick. Take a look last week, coming off fighting a hamstring injury. Still got 9 targets in that game. Didn't have a lot of actual yardage itself, but it's the target share that you look forward to and who you have that rapport with the young wide receivers between Jeudy and Tim Patrick. No injury designation this week for Tim Patrick, so coming in even more healthy than he was last week, I think he's going to be able to have a legit chance at scoring a touchdown. And if you're going to say I only have to pay $4,900 for a legitimate shot at maybe 5 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown or more, I'm interested in him. How about the Philadelphia Eagles? Jalen Reagor coming back now. You have more outlets, more weapons, a better offensive line. Jalen Reagor is going to be focused in this offense for a couple deep shots against the New York Giants, paying only, $4,400 for him on DraftKings. Not a bad option at all. And as we slide it down, one that I was a little bit scratching my head at for how cheap these two guys are coming in, Josh Reynolds for the Rams, only sitting at 3,500 going against one of the worst secondaries in football. If he gets a touchdown, watch out. And certainly there's a chance to get more because if you figure Russ is going to cook on the opposite side, there's more cooks in the kitchen on the opposite side also for the Rams. That's really low. And also an extremely low shot here. One of those paying guys you want to take a look at. Washington Redskins, a little bit banged up at wide receiver, but if you watch last week, Cam Sims making an appearance, being explosive, and when you have one of those games, they look to try to get you the football. It's not to say he's going to have 6 or 7 targets in a game or even get close to 100 yards, but if he can get 3 catches for 60 yards with a chance at a touchdown or maybe more against a bad Detroit team, $3,200. What do you got to spend, man?
It's paying, yeah. And look, it's going to be quick passes from Alex Smith. So those sorts of guys are absolutely in play. When I come through here, I like Chase Claypool. I think that game is sneaky points, even with the weather.
It is.
I think both offenses
It
can
is.
play through it. We're looking at a 45 and a half total. I think it gets over that pretty easy. That's one that I already put money on. I think that total is too low, even with the weather. Brandon Ayuk, just by default, I mean, he is the only weapon they're going to have. Debo Samuel out, George Kittle, of course, out, all the running backs out except for McKinnon. So Brandon Ayuk is back, and we saw the week before when he played before this, he didn't even have COVID, but apparently he hung out with someone who didn't end up having COVID, so he couldn't. I mean, just a bunch of fucking nonsense. But back-to-back 20-point outings. So Brandon Ayuk just by default. One guy that I really like right here is Christian Kirk at 5,700, and he's my prop play for the day as well. 3 straight 20-point outings, 5 straight double-digit fantasy points. When you look at Arizona, so you're going to have Hopkins being shadowed by Tre'Davious White. So what do you get on the other side with Christian Kirk, who lines up on the perimeter on 88% of his routes? You're going to see Josh Norman coming back from a hamstring injury, giving up nearly half a fantasy point per route ran against, being targeted on a quarter of his defensive routes. When he is out, if they give him a break, it's Levi Wallace, who still can't cover anybody. So Christian Kirk has a real chance to be the number one receiver this week with Hopkins battling White. I like Christian Kirk quite a bit. I think he gets over 20 DraftKings points this week. You can sign me up for him. As I go further down, I love John Brown. I love stacking him with Josh Allen this week. Again, you're going to have Patrick Peterson shadowing Stephon Diggs. You look on the other side, Dre Kirkpatrick limited in practice all week. The rest of that secondary for Arizona is terrible. And who's their most targeted corner? Dre Kirkpatrick, targeted on 23% of his routes. I like John Brown, who was targeted 11 times last week. He's finally healthy for Buffalo. I think he's a nice play this week. Deontay Johnson, I have interest in all the Steelers wide receivers. And, last week it was Johnson with 10 targets. Other weeks it's going to be Claypool. So it's going to be frustrating. You're going to be finding yourself going, damn it, why is James Washington catching a bleeping pass? Or Ray McLeod, why the hell is that happening? But there's still upside there at 5,200. One guy who I think is too cheap and I know has been sort of disappointing, does have a nice history against Tampa Bay, 3 straight games of 16, 18, and 23. It's awfully cheap for DJ Moore at 5,100. It's weird to see him at that price. I know he's been real boom or bust, and the last couple of weeks, single digits. The 3 weeks before that, 25, 14, and 19. In a game where I expect them to have to throw to stay in this game. It's going to be tough to run the ball against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to have to throw the football. I think DJ Moore at 5,100 is simply too cheap. Another guy I don't mind at this low 5K is Sterling Shepard. He's the number one target. He's been targeted 26 times in the 3 games since he's returned. Double-digit fantasy points in each of those games. So I like him as well. I do like Tim Patrick, 9 targets last week. Seems to be a red zone guy as well for Drew Lock, so I like him. Look in the slot again. Curtis Samuel has turned in. I think all 3 of those receivers seem underpriced for me for Carolina. I expect a lot of passes in that game. Curtis Samuel at 4,900. He's going to see that Sean Murphy bunting coverage in the slot, trying to avoid, of course, Carlton Davis. So guys like DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel are going to see Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy bunting. And we saw they can't cover anyone in those 2 positions. Carlton Davis is their best corner. So I do like them quite a bit. I don't mind Emmanuel Sanders either at 4,800. Another Buffalo receiver in the slot. Byron Murphy struggles in the slot for Arizona. Cole Beasley at 4,700. A couple of duds the last couple of weeks. This could be a get-right spot. I think there's a lot of points, a lot of passing in that game. So I do like Cole Beasley as well. Coming down just a little bit in Detroit, no Kenny Golladay. TJ Hawkinson now questionable with the toe issue. Danny Amendola could be pretty interesting in the slot. 10 targets last week. Now, Washington, number 2 right now in the league against opposing wide receivers. That defense is sneaky good. But in the slot, Jimmy Moreland, probably the biggest liability in the secondary besides Darby and Kendall Fuller there. So I do like Danny Amendola to get a high target share this week at 3,900. I could go there. And then you mentioned Josh Reynolds. I mean, look at Josh Reynolds. 22 targets over the last 3 weeks. Over the last 5 weeks, 13, 15, and an 8 in the last 3. A good matchup. I do like Josh Reynolds quite a bit as well. And I was going to hope for good weather in Lambeau and go to Chris Conley down here at 3,000, but I simply can't do it this week with all the weather situations there. That's it at wide receiver. I love talking wide receivers. My goodness, it's always our longest segment of the show. So now, getting to probably one of the shorter segments of the show, let's just go all the way through tight ends since there's not a ton here. What do you like at tight end this week?
Yeah, no, we're going to get tight ends here, but I'm also going to have the weekly column. They're going to have the Pain Core 4 that we'll give out at the end of the show.
Oh, I love that. Okay, very
it's
good.
great. It's great stuff. Let's get to some tight ends here. Darren Waller, of course, 5,900. Am I looking to pay up for this? Because I think the Denver defense, when you take a look at them as a whole, they don't get a lot of credit, but it's a decent defense, completely healthy this week. I don't know if I want to pay up for the top tight end on the board at 5,900 for Waller, even though I do think we get some points in that game. No, how about the opposite side? Noah Fant coming in at 4,900. One of those weapons that Drew Lock test or trust nicked up a little bit last week. It's a shame, too, because his very first catch, like a 35-yard catch, got hurt, fought it off the rest of the game, and also fought off some practices this week as well. I do think it's a decent look here. Jared Cook, again, I think he has a great shot at getting a touchdown versus San Francisco. But again, a lot of mouths to feed paying up for 4,600, which is great because I think there's a lot more value that we usually pay up and say, I can guarantee I can get this amount with guys. Now you're going to try to downgrade. Evan Ingram is one of those guys that always pops up. Going against the Philadelphia Eagles that we know do struggle at linebacker, but getting a little bit healthier this week at that position. 4,500. I always look at the board, and outside of the top guys, like if there's a Travis Kelce on the board, if there's a George Kittle on the board, you know what you're getting. There's a legitimate chance 7 catches for 100 yards and a score. The guy I always take a look at, Evan Ingram's upside is always so major if old Brick Hands can just catch the football in some big shots. If he catches them, you get your 6 for 75 and a touchdown. If he doesn't, it goes back to 3 and 30, and the Giants fans calling him a bust, and we got to move on from that player. He's always so tough to gauge, but his ceiling is so high each and every week. Mike Gesicki loved his ceiling before, but now with Tua coming in, does he have that same, rapport that he used to have with Fitzpatrick? We're still waiting on to see that. Dallas Goedert should be a decent shot at 4,200 for the Philadelphia Eagles, but even looking at a little bit lower here, I got to tell you, one guy, and this is going to be in my part of my pain core 4 here, Tyler Higbee for the Rams. And the reason I say that is not involved and banged up in the past. But as you know, I take a look at Chris Godwin, the wide receiver for Tampa Bay. If you have a hand injury and you're a pass catcher, it affects every single thing you do. Read the tea leaves during the week. He's saying now, finally, my hand is back to normal. I should be good to go. And that sends off alarm bells when you're going against a really bad defense in Seattle. Maybe we see a repeat performance out of Higbee, what we saw early in the season against the Eagles. 6 catches, 66 yards, couple red zone targets, maybe a touchdown or 2. Him only getting charged 3,700 looks like something I wanted to buy into. And if you like pain as well, Kyle, your San Francisco 49ers down in the fourth quarter. Look who we got on DraftKings, 3,500. Jordan Reed, if he just got activated a week ago, played, has the extra time, doesn't really have an injury designation coming in. Sneaky guy down in the red zone that Nick Mullins might want to look for with that elite pass rush from New Orleans.
Jordan Q. Reed. Yeah, if he can play more than one play, he might be there. And you're right about Waller. Of course, I have Darren Waller marked. And, Oh, yeah, okay, I was looking at the wrong. I was like, damn, am I muted right now? I do like Darren Waller. Darren Waller's a safe play, right? If you're like me, I get burned by tight ends all the time. I'll have these massive lineups, and then my fucking tight end will have 4 points.
2 points.
Yeah, so Darren Waller's one of those guys. He's going to get you, between 10 and 15 every week, so you can trust him to get that. Can you pay up 5,900? That's another story. Hawkinson I would like, but we got to watch it. I don't like playing guys with toe injuries. That makes me very, very nervous when they're battling. Toe injuries are the absolute worst. I've broken a couple in my roofing days, and what a pain in the ass. Noah Fant, I don't mind Fant. I am nervous about that lingering ankle injury that's been going on all year. We saw last week, started out great. We love Noah Fant. First catch, 32 yards, and then he limps off the field, goes to the locker room, comes back, wasn't the same player after that. So I have a little exposure there. Jared Cook a little bit. And then we get to Evan Ingram. The Eagles struggle against tight ends, no doubt about it. He only put up an 11 a couple weeks ago, but again, at 4,500, we're talking about a guy being targeted 29 times over the last 3 weeks. So you've got to consider it. Right below that, the Bengals allow the second most fantasy points in the league to opposing tight ends. Eric Ebron is going to be targeted in the red zone. Good for, 5 to 8 targets. I like Eric Ebron at 4,400. I like Dallas Goedert quite a bit. I know he was only targeted once last week, but another week to get healthy. I think he can get going. Carson Wentz getting all those other weapons back, so it's not like the defenses are just like, focus on Fulgham and Goddard, and we got him stopped. Now you've got Sanders. Now you've got Rager. You might see some Alshon Jeffrey this week. How much he'll play, we'll have to see. So a lot of weapons coming back should open things up for Goddard. It wouldn't shock me if he gets into the end zone. Austin Hooper back for Cleveland. if there's any skill position besides running back I'm going to target in a passing game in bad weather, it's probably the tight end, these short little quick passes. They're able to get the ball into the red zone. Maybe Hooper looks, a short little, play action bootleg. He rolls out to the right. Boom, he gets in the end zone. At 3,900, I could consider that. I love Tyler Higbee. I'm actually shocked anyone else brought him up. I love Tyler Higbee this week. I think you're absolutely right with that hand injury, especially at tight end when they're asking you to block on, jet sweeps, etc. He's not a huge blocking tight end, but you need your hands when you're a tight end, when you're blocking, trying to get off the line. I think he's a sneaky play this week when they're trying to focus on all those receivers outside and what are we going to do with this banged up secondary to stop him. Tyler Higbee should be wide open over the middle of the field. I like him quite a bit at 3,700. I was going to consider Robert Tonyan, but he did not practice on Friday.
Yeah.
So that's
Downgrade.
something to keep an eye. Yeah, it's a huge downgrade. Maybe a guy like Jay Sternberger would fill in. And then one more guy I have here at 3,300. If in Donnie's words, if you like pain, Logan Thomas, he plays 86% of the defensive snaps. I've played him a few times this year. He's burned me, and then of course the couple times I don't, he puts up double-digit fantasy points. Still going to see 5 to 7 targets. If Tre'Davious White's getting the better of Hopkins on the outside, guys like Kirk, why am I thinking Arizona? With Alex Smith liking to throw short. You remember Alex Smith's successful days with the 49ers, loved going to Vernon Davis over the middle of the field. I do think tight ends become more prominent in this offense with Alex Smith in Washington against a bad Detroit defense, if I could get my mind right here. I like Logan Thomas quite a bit at 3,300 as well, and I think that's it for me at tight end. Again, if you want to take a flyer on like a Jay Sternberger if Robert Tonyan misses, I suppose we could go there. And wrapping it up here, let's go to the defenses. Not a ton to love here, but what are you looking at? What are you looking at defense?
Yeah, normal suspects out there. The Steelers should be able to get a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow. He's been effective against the pressure, but we're talking about how many sacks can you rack up. He looks like the Steelers probably should win this football game, so he might be able to tack on an extra 1 or 2 at the end of the game, maybe pick up a fumble or 2. Philadelphia Eagles, good pass rush going up against Daniel Jones. We do know that usually helps out, and you can get some turnovers off Daniel Jones. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, same thing. Teddy Bridgewater is a good mobile quarterback, but if you think Tampa Bay is going to win, that's a pretty strong pass rush. You didn't see it last week because they got blitzed by, obviously, the New Orleans Saints, so the pass rush doesn't matter when the other team is just running out the clock. But if you really want to get down as low as you can go and try to save some money at quarterback, running back, I got to tell you, an interesting one is the Rams on DraftKings at only 2,200. You say, Donnie, wait a second. Seattle scores on everybody 30+. That's not the right angle to take a look at is overall in the points. It's what can you get out of your team, whether it's a decent special teams play or, more importantly in this one, Aaron Donald in that pass rush. You saw them rush last week, the Buffalo Bills against Seattle. If you can get to, Russ in the backfield, 4 to 5 sacks, strip sack, fumble, interception, that's where it pays off. And 2,200 is basically saying, like, I don't know if the Rams can even score a point on defense. I think the Rams can win this football game. If they win, there's going to be a high-scoring game if we anticipate it, a lot of drop-back passes. If I can get 4 sacks and a fumble, 2,200 is awfully cheap for that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of pain there going up against Russell Wilson. And you're right at the top, the Packers obviously got to consider them at home now against, 6th-round quarterback and all the weather, absolutely. The Eagles against Daniel Jones, turnover machine, got to consider them. Tampa Bay with that pass rush. I don't mind Washington all that much against Detroit. They can get going. That defense is sneaky good. I do like the Saints at 3,000 against the 49ers at home. We saw what they did to that Tampa Bay offense. You got to think that Tampa Bay offense just a little bit better than Nick Mullins, Brandon Ayuk, and Jordan Reed. So the Saints 3,000 at home in the Dome. I could certainly get into that. Now, if I go down here, I was trying to find a defense that I could get into. I almost talked myself into the Lions against Alex Smith, but I couldn't do it. That defense is so bad. So I took another bad defense. We saw what Baker Mayfield and that offense looked like in those weather conditions 2 weeks ago. Houston Texans at 2,400. Dog shit defense, no doubt about it. But now, and they can't stop the run. But now, if you don't have to worry about making up for those abysmal corners on the outside because of the conditions and covering downfield, if you can bring everyone up and sort of slow down this running game for Cleveland, the Houston Texans at 2,400, we know Baker Mayfield's prone to turnovers when things get tough. Slippery football with the rain, the wind. Maybe you get one of these sneaky defensive touchdowns out of J.J. Watt. He finally gets his 100th sack. So I like the Texans a little bit at 2,400, even though it makes me really, really nervous. And then I had the Rams marked as well. I think that's really interesting that you did. Anytime you have Larry Donald or Aaron Donald, Larry Donald, Aaron Donald. Yeah, you got to love Larry Donald. I mean, come on. Anytime Aaron Donald's on the field, look, the strip sack fumble is in play. Jalen Ramsey, Darius Williams, big play guys. So even though it's a great Seattle offense, no doubt about it, we're looking for value here. We're looking for low ownership. So I could certainly go the Rams. 2,200. So that's every position. And now I guess we have a new segment, Donnie's core four of pain. Let's hear this core four of pain for this week.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw in a defense just to be, like, keep it low, because I find it interesting here, because we'll go with the core pain four, and then we'll add the Rams as defense. So that core pain four we're going to run with is Nick Mullins at quarterback, and this is all DraftKings, 5,300. Wayne Gallman at running back, 4,500. Tim Patrick at wide receiver, 4,900. And Tyler Higbee at 3,700. If you combine the Rams with that, you have $7,350 as a average remaining player salary for a running back, 2 wide receivers, and a flex position. So if I call my shot here, Kyle, and say Nick Mullins going to throw for 3, like, again, we're talking long shots here.
Yeah.
300 yards and 2 touchdowns out of your quarterback, and maybe Wayne Gallman gets 10 carries but steals the goal line and punches one in. Tim Patrick with an average wide receiver game, 6 catches, 60 yards. Higbee scores a touchdown, and the Rams get a couple sacks. You're talking about you can spend up for guys that can go off. I love this new segment here, and that is a lineup that I'm putting in on DraftKings right now, centered around those 5 spots, with my pain core 4 being Higbee, Patrick, Gallman, and Mullins. Good stuff.
Good stuff. I love that. I was unprepared for that. I guess I'll just try to do one off the top of my head. Next week I will be more prepared. Okay, let's see. So off the top of my head, let's go the pain core 4. I'm going to, at quarterback, I'm going to say Daniel Jones down at 5,200, the cheapest starter. Jake Luton might be a little cheaper. I'm going to go Daniel Jones at 5,200 against the Eagles. At running back, it's too easy to take Mike Davis at 4,000, so I will take J.D. McKissick at 4,900. At wide receiver, I will say Danny Amendola at 3,900 against Washington in the slot. At tight end, let's go Logan Thomas down there at 3,300, coming the other way against Detroit. And for defense, I will say the Houston Texans against Cleveland in the bad weather conditions. That would be my pain 5, if you will. I love that. That's a great idea for the end of the show, and we're going to keep it. So that's our show. Again, big thanks to Donnie, doubling our knowledge. We love doing the show. It's our marquee show of the week, our final look show here. More of you watch this than any other show. Thank you all so much. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, be part of our giveaway. Check out Donnie and all his winning picks over at rightwager.com. As usual, my player pool, projections, all that stuff's in Draft Dashboard. Check out the video description. Links for everything down there. Donnie and I will be live Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, 1 hour before kickoff, going over all of our bets, plays, predictions, breaking this game down right up until kickoff. Thank you all so much again for watching. I hope you have a great weekend. May the fantasy gods be with you all. Goodbye, folks.